Hello, lovely podcast people. I hope you're well. Apologies that this is a parenting podcast for those of you who are regular listeners for my actual expertise of nutrition. But also, thanks very much, those of you who have reached out in terms of feedback. It's even been nice, some people saying that they've felt really encouraged by my parenting podcasts, for instance, in terms of validation. So if you do have, one person said, they have some know-it-alls around them, friends and family who like to stick their oar in, but getting some validation. Again, why you value my opinion as validation, I don't know, but I'm glad it makes you feel good. Sometimes it's just a nice thing, isn't it? This is why I did some of my wisdom podcasts, because I feel like I'm a wise friend. It's funny actually on that thing of wisdom. I was thinking about this for one of our MNU live lectures, check-in weeks for the students. I can't remember what made me think of it, but it was like this new TikTok or reel trend where you're like looking down at your phone and it's like, and it sounds like someone texting to their friends. And it says, me texting my friends to, be strong and keep going, and they're doing really well, and maybe take some time for themselves whilst I medicate my own trauma and anxiety and depression with drugs and alcohol. And it just made me laugh in terms of giving, wisdom to other people, but, not always making the right choices yourself or, knowing what you should do. And it's difficult. It's very often easier said than done, which is, I've talked about toxic positivity and stuff like that, and people it's much better if it comes from within. And I think that's why if you just let some of my podcasts wash over you, I'm not talking at you or to you or trying to undermine your situation. I feel like sometimes just hearing stuff, being inspired by something, going, what, my life isn't that bad. It's a great thing if you can do it internally, but someone else going, could be worse, is never helpful. Anyway, I'm glad that some of you found it validating. I'm glad that some of you have used some of the parenting hacks, life tools sort of things, and it's been working. Today, this comes from a few different things. My last parenting podcast, I thought about this from questions that have come through on my posts, DMs that I get on Instagram. It's essentially about when people say, you're so lucky your children are XYZ. And I often say, I'm not lucky. I made them this way. They're mine. And, through parenting on purpose. So a few key themes. I like to just write stuff down sometimes as I say them out loud, because, I don't really plan these things very well. But it's short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And actually, someone did actually say, it was a question about my parenting podcast regarding, rough play and it being a really great thing. And they have a 4-year-old and then a girl and a slightly older boy by the sound of it, based on the fact that she said something like, sometimes, I'll see it coming and one of them's going to get hurt and she gets hit, or I think she typed, or his balls get crushed, which are just funny when you have kids. Just always the accident, someone gets kneed somewhere, it's like, But, the questions around that sort of rough play. And that's one of the things of consequences, which I guess is really part of the title of this podcast is consequences. And I suppose consequences being a phrase for appropriate punishments, but punishments that are not you exercising control and power over your children. So you want your children to be able to self-regulate. And you want your children to be able to be masters of their own destiny, being able to be the geniuses that they are, being able to be expert decision makers for themselves, so that you're not constantly having to watch them, constantly having to fight with them, battle with them. So I mentioned in my last parenting podcast about giving them options, allowing them to exercise that decision-making muscle, as it were. So I think that these are the two key themes: consequences and short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. So in that fighting scenario, there was the question came to me in terms of, do you stop it when you see it coming? And also the 4-year-old really is not understanding. They weren't a native speaker, so they use the word stop because it's not a word in their language. But I think they're probably bilingual children / parents. And but the 4-year-old not really adhering to the rule. But so again, within that, you can be. One of the issues is when people are lax. So being really consistent, that's another thing. If you are really consistent with discipline, and it's not always easy, like I love my children. They are so funny. And even if they're naughty, often they just crack me up. And especially at bedtime, because I just, and I'm making an informed choice there sometimes of just, I'm trying to get them to sleep at an appropriate time, and we're in bed, but they're just excited to be around me, to be around each other, and we still get to bed on time and we wake up easily and whatever. But I suppose I could be a bit more strict. But they'll chant stuff. Like the other day, they were just chanting, leg tickles, because the 2 days earlier I had stroked their legs, tickled their legs, and I normally do belly kisses and back tickles, and they always ask for them. If any of you have long-term followers, Orly, when she was like 2 or 3 years old, she's like, Daddy, can you tickle my belly for 6 minutes? It's like the cutest video. Honestly, if I was like a TikToker or I posted it somewhere that wasn't just a 24-hour, it's like one of those videos you think would just probably go viral because it's so cute. Anyway, so I'm not good at my consistency in that front. But anyway, because the problem is the short-term sacrifice is either embarrassment for yourself, and you need to try and get over that. It's your children being sad and unhappy, which I struggle with, but some people don't. So I'll give you, for instance, 2 for instances. A parent who applies these rules, she was leaving the house and her little boy and older daughter, the little boy wouldn't put his shoes on. He refused to put his shoes on. Now, and I'm not going to give the name or who this is or this, that, and the other, because some people just get a bit over the top with things, and it's like, you can have your own opinions about things. I don't care. He refused to put his shoes on. They needed to leave. So essentially she was just like, okay, if you don't want to put your shoes on, that's absolutely fine, but I think your feet are going to hurt. So I really recommend you put them on. No, I don't want shoes. Okay, cool. Let's go, everyone. And they were just walking to the shops. They live close to town. They live central. And they literally walked, and he had bare feet. And he was loving it, and he thought it was cool, and he was running. But obviously after a while, I don't think he ever stepped on his own. I think his feet just started to hurt. I actually thought of another story from another set of parents. But anyway, the thing was, can you pick me up? And it's like, oh, no, sweetie, I'm carrying shopping bags with this. I can't carry you, but my feet hurt. I'm really sorry. And then he's crying and wailing and this, that, and the other. And obviously there's a point where you want to, but this is what's called a consequence. And what I want to explain is because even with my children, this has been done stupidly, if I'm going to be a bit mean, stupidly with other people disciplining my children. They just don't understand the concept of an actual appropriate consequence. Because if you punish, you go, if you don't do X, Y, Z, you can't have dessert, for instance. Like, I hate food punishments, and unfortunately, as a single parent, I'm not able to be the only one who disciplines my children. And I hate this concept because obviously as a professional, I'm like, you shouldn't be punishing with food. You shouldn't be rewarding with food. Like, again, I'll do a podcast on the whole thing of like medicating feelings with food. I know that will ring true to a lot of you know. And fortunately, that didn't happen. But unfortunately, punishments for children and rewards for children around food and sweets and junk is probably not a good idea, but we won't go there in this podcast too much. But your consequence needs to be teaching them something. So, for instance, some parents and especially in-laws or grandparents, but particularly in-laws, just idiots because they're just old school parenting style, and they're just like, oh, don't run near that, oh, you'll get hurt, or this, that, and the other. But the thing is, so when Orly was a baby, she'd like to go under the dining room table. And obviously there's a chance of banging your head. So if you constantly mollycoddle and wrap your child in wool, they don't learn. Like, I'm sure some of my listeners are of an era where you had penknives when you were like 10. And I just, that's still, I'm sure, a thing in some really, is the word liberal people. And I think it's super cool. Like, I panic if Orly and Arlo are using sharp stuff, like especially Arlo because he's a maverick. Orly, she's very, very careful. So, but there's just this level of like there's a one of these indigenous tribes. I think they call them like the tree people, at least on the documentary I watched years ago. And essentially they have toddlers living in tree houses, and there's no like barricades, but these babies just living like 20, 30, 40, whatever feet in the air, and they just know not to go near the edge. It's just almost like it's somehow innate. Obviously it's not innate, but it's learned, and it's from being a baby, and I don't know. It's still a bit crazy, isn't it? Because one of these things with the consequences is like, oh, let your kid run into the road, they'll learn their lesson. Well, you can't, because that lesson could be fatal. But tailing it down, bumping your head on the underneath of a table because you're under there playing, immediately your child will learn from it. You don't shout at them, well, that's because you're being stupid, you're under the table, you shouldn't have been under there. It's like love and care and affection, and oh, look, you bump your head here. And there's other funny stuff. I don't know where I got this from, but we would always go like, I'm not going to go into it. But anyway, I'm just going to write it in case it's worthwhile saying another time, because it's good to provide context. Anyway, your child's a genius. So allowing appropriate consequences. Now, that's an obvious consequence. Bump your head, you get hurt. They'll be more careful next time, etc., etc. When danger's involved, it changes the game a little bit. But when it's like, okay, you're not going to wear your shoes, fine. The other story was not putting a coat on. Oh, it's cold out. Then the child gets cold. You don't immediately go, see, I told you so. You still provide care. And you go, I'm really, really sorry that you're cold. Remember I said to put your coat on. I'm really sorry. It must be horrible. Next time we'll definitely bring your coat, shall we? Okay. And then it's like, well, can I have your coat? Well, no, because then daddy will be cold. And that won't be nice. So we'll get home as quickly as possible, but next time. And then obviously if your kid's getting frostbite or something, you might find a way around this. But it's a learning curve. If you go out and you're ridiculous, I've said this to myself a few times, like, why are you dressed so, like, I don't know if I use the word inappropriately for work, but I'm like, dress in layers. Someone's hot and someone's cold and someone's, they don't sit near the window, and it's just like, just wear 2 layers so that you can adjust your temperature ever so slightly. Whoever time points this is probably going to laugh at hearing that. So, but with your children, appropriate consequences. So again, it's like not, at the dinner time or just anything. Oh, you hurt your brother or your sister, so I'm going to punish you with food. Like, how does a child go, how are those two things related? How is me having dessert related to me hitting? It's bizarre. It doesn't make any sense to them. It's a completely inappropriate consequence. The consequence needs to be a natural consequence of that. So, for instance, I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to go to bed late. Well, we still need to get up at this time in the morning. Well, now you're tired. Now this doesn't feel nice, does it? Etc., etc. If Orly and Arlo, they're like, can we mess about a bit more? And then like, oh cool, can we have iPad time? And I'm like, and I'll say to them at time, remember, like, this is our time. You either use it for your iPads or your whatever. It's an appropriate consequence. Oh, I was messing about and it was fun play, but it was maybe not what they really wanted to do. But they learn, and the next time they make a choice because you've helped them to understand that decision. saying that out loud, I'm like, oh, it's so obvious. But there's lots of different things. I feel like because people will just start World War III and go, put your coat on, put it on, or you're always late. Da, da, da. So the final thing I want to say to you is like the final scenario, because you can just discuss these with other parents. Just like, I don't know, jump onto one of my Instagram lives or something. We can chat about it on there. But another instance of a couple of parents, they had their eldest, their daughter, she was really, she was like a super high achiever. Anyway, the son was just like a bit more lazy, laid back, laissez-faire mentality, always late. And this was phenomenal to hear this story because it shows you about the sacrifice as well. So the sacrifice when the kid's cold or feet hurting is they're crying and they're wailing and they're embarrassing you. And it's like, you know what? This is one day in my child's life. And then I'm never going to have to deal with this again, potentially. And what they did with this other situation, the sacrifice was they called grandma. They got grandma to come round to the house but hide. And in the morning, they were like, I need to try and make sure I don't use the kid's name. Not that you're going to know it's just a kid's name, but it's just inappropriate if anyone knows them. But they're like, right, everyone, we're going to school, grab your school bags. We've got 5 minutes till we need to leave, or like 10 minutes till we need to leave. Right, everyone, we've got 5 minutes, like giving a countdown as they do each and every day. Okay, if you're not by the door, we're going to leave. So this is another thing, the whole 1, 2, 3 thing. We're going to leave. Not saying we're going to leave in 5 minutes and then running around and helping that kid, etc. It's we're leaving in 5 minutes. And if you are not there at the door, we're leaving without you. Home Alone. I saw another funny meme about Home Alone recently. If Home Alone was today, and it's just like a text message. Oh, hi, Mum, Dad, you've woken up. I'm not here. Oh, sorry, Kevin. I will get on the next flight back. Like, done. Anyway. They left him and he didn't even realize that he was messing about, playing with toys. And I can't remember how old he was, maybe 7. And he was then like, where's Mum and Dad? Where's my sister? She's got a really cool name, isn't his sister, actually. And he was like around the house, he's like a bit panicked. And then he goes into the kitchen and Grandma's just sat there at the dining room table. And he's like, Grandma, I didn't know you here. And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm just here. And he's like, I'm supposed to be going to school. And she's like, oh, they left. They said to you, remember? Did you not hear them? And he said, oh, they didn't come and get me. And she said, oh, well, they said you need to be at the door. They said 10 minutes and then they said 5 minutes. And he said, well, you need to take me, Grandma. She said, oh, I can't take you. I haven't got a car. You'll have to wait for them to come back. And this situation, again, you might be there, oh, it's traumatized him. Like, is it really? And I'm sure there'll be some Karens talking about this. And, in this day and age, you don't know. Like, I've had incredibly good experiences with social workers. But, there's situations of not so good social workers, obviously, as there is in every profession. But, taking an issue and making a mountain out of a molehill and you should be allowed to parent mostly how you like within the realms of not completely damaging your children. There are obviously scenarios of they can't take children away from parents just for, even for quite bad stuff, because the alternative is no better. Anyway, I digress. The mum and dad came home and the kid was like, I need to get to school. We left. We said we were going. And he was like, now I'm going to have to go in the late, and all the children are going to look at me, and as I walk in, well, next time, be on time. And apparently, he was he was the first at the door every single day, and it's like there is a sacrifice there. There's like a double trip to school. There's, the kid being worried, which can be a bit heartbreaking sometimes. There's getting grandma over, specifically, like it's a bit of a. But think about the chronic stress and it was causing them every single day for a year or two of school life, and then boom, forevermore, he's perfect. So there you go. So again, talking about consequences, it's like the whole you do this 1, 2, and it's like, well, know what happens when you get to 3. Like, because if you're not a parent who hits, which I hope you're not personally, what's the 3? Okay, I'm going to shout. Again, I personally feel like whenever I shout, I'm failing. Like a slightly more raised and stern voice, great. But, if you do these things, and again, if you're coming, I don't want my podcast ever to create guilt. It's just like, cool, I didn't know any better. I was parenting on the fly. Like, we're all learning as we go. But you can start now. Now, the problem is if changing behavior is super difficult. Like, I did this from birth of my children. So, yes, I just now am in a better place. And I feel, lucky that I was in a situation where I was able to do that. And I haven't got any of like, oh, my kids are great, yours aren't type. I have none of those feelings. I only have kind of empathy for when, right, we're starting now, this is going to be an uphill battle, but you need to be consistent and the consequences need to make sense, and you need to have this mentality of consistent short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. It's not going to be a one-off like that. That story I told of being late, it was a one-off and boom, it was magical. But it's not always going to be the case. Like, over time, they will learn about appropriate consequences if they make sense. I don't know if I have any other good examples of consequences. But with consequences, you're supporting autonomy. The whole, if you're going to bump your head under the table. Like, it was amazing, like, letting Orly be like that. And then she's this, like, teeny tiny, she could walk from 10 months. So, like, and she was just mini. So it was cute seeing her walking at such a young age. But then she would, like, again, if you're not watching this, sorry, but, just stoop her head to get out from under. And I was just like, obviously a bit of a proud dad, like, oh, well, she's so clever. She's not smashing her head open on the table. Yeah, so trying to think. There's other ones. Maybe I'll talk about maybe some food-related consequences that would be appropriate in terms of, because some people can be like, oh, you're spoiling them, this, that, and the other. So there are some good ones, but I'll leave that there. I hope it's helpful. Give me some feedback if it is, or if you try it, or if it just, even anything you think of, because again, I do read loads and loads and loads, hundreds, thousands of messages each week, and they help me think. I like to think deeply about these things. I like to understand from other people's life experiences what's worked, what hasn't, what I didn't cover, what tripped you up. Cool. Those of you who are MNU wannabes, those of you who have started the prerequisite course that launched on the 30th of May, lots of people message me, how do I do this? Please understand, as much as I'm a very, very, very accessible founder/CEO, and I love social media, how do I do this? It's like it is a real company. We have a whole team. Different people have different jobs. And it's really difficult for me to tell you all about things tapping away on my phone on the fly, when you could just email and get documents or, best practice protocols sent to you. Anyway, so if you're interested in anything, obviously MNU enrollments are on the 13th of July. If you need a prerequisite for that has now launched, that you would need to complete by September when MNU starts, 5th of September, I think it is, that MNU starts this year, 2022. Anyway, this is just a little bit of a plug. Hope you've enjoyed that. I will get some nutrition stuff. Remember the podcast, martin-mcdonald.com/EP, and then whatever the episode is, EP 80 or whatever. And you get the show notes, the time points, any references from the nutrition ones. And likewise on my website, remember, you can make suggestions. That's my favorite and most efficient place. Like the micronutrients podcast that I did was all of your questions, put together. Like, when there's common themes, I'm like, right, a lot of people want to hear this. It is difficult for me to just come up with stuff on the spot that people want to hear about, because I've been just saying lots of stuff about nutrition for 20 years, and it's like, well, what do people need to hear right now? What questions are out there? What myths are out there? What are people confused about right now? So do use the suggestions form on the website too. You can design, if you design me a whole podcast episode, I will do it. If you're like, this is what your title would be, these are the 4 questions I would ask you if I was interviewing you, rather than just menopause, like, geez, what do you want me to say? Like, it's an enormous area. Anyway, cool. Much love. Until next time.